Hi there everybody and welcome to Guitar Interactive. My name's Tom Quayle and today I want to take you through basically how to develop speed and accuracy with regards to legato playing. And actually, although this is going to be specific to legato today, you could use these ideas for any technique that you're working on, be it sweep picking or hybrid picking. You know, any kind of technique would work for this. And the essence of this lesson is basically going to be to slow you right down. Effectively, what tends to happen when people practice technique is that they tend to do this process of, okay, I've got to start slowly and then gradually speed up. And unfortunately, what tends to happen is the actual goal of speeding up becomes too much at the forefront of your mind. So you'll try and speed up too quickly and the accuracy isn't developed at the same time. So two things happen. The first is the technique doesn't become second nature to you. So if you try and improvise with that technique, you'll probably find when you improvise, your technical level is much lower than it would be normally. If you learned a piece of music, your technique is much higher. The second thing that will happen is that you'll have to expend a lot of energy in order to play fast because you'll be thinking a lot about the technique. So what you want is a high technical level that's also very easy. It feels simple to you. And there's only really one way I've found personally of developing this, and it seems to work for a lot of my students, which is to practice incredibly slowly so that you're totally in control of your technique. And if you do this for a long, long time, it's like anything else for the human brain. It stays in your brain and becomes subconscious, and you'll learn it as muscle memory. So we're going to look at this with relation to legato today. So before we do this, I want to make sure that you're actually using your technique in the most efficient way. So we're going to look at the left hand position and also some of the right hand technique that comes into playing legato. And most of the material is going to be centered around the key of G major. And I'm going to give you a few ideas that you can practice at home, give you some licks basically that you can play, that you can practice. But the first thing is, let's look at the left hand position. So a few things are really important. The first is the actual position of the hand on the fretboard. And the first thing I'm going to do is your thumb position wants to be in the middle of the back of the neck, pretty much where I have a skunk stripe on the back of my guitar. If you don't worry, you just need to position your thumb in the middle of the back of the neck. Now at this point, when you're playing legato, your thumb might move up and down in small increments, but the really big thing is to not have your thumb over the top and not have your thumb in this kind of a position so that your thumb is arched back, pointing towards the headstock. This position with the thumb is more classical position and gives you the biggest stretch and the most control. So once you've positioned your thumb in this way, if you bring the guitar neck back round, you'll notice there's a big gap here underneath my hand, and I'm going to retain that gap and then gradually just bring my fingers round and stick them on the fretboard, in this case on the D string, with my first finger on the 4th fret, second on the 5th, and so on and so forth. So each finger's got its own fret. Now this means that you have quite an extreme wrist position. And my shoulder is bent here as well. It's not uncomfortable, but it's a position you have to get used to. But this is the most efficient position for playing legato. So you really want to try and get into this, this kind of position. So the other thing you might notice is all the fingers are nice and curled. None of the knuckle joints in my hand are straight. They're all curled into a C shape. So this is the position that you want, like this, basically. So as if you were gripping an egg between your fingertips. So you're gripping the egg by the tips of it and you're just very lightly squeezing it to keep hold of it. Okay, so back onto the guitar. Okay, so that's the position we're going to play in. Doesn't matter how wide the stretch is. If I bring my guitar down again, you'll see my thumb is in the middle of the back of the neck, roughly positioned behind my second finger. Okay, so that gives me the best position to play legato with. So let's go back to this position where each finger has its own fret. The second thing I want you to be aware of is the actual part of the finger that you're going to strike the string with, and that's whether you're doing a hammer-on or a pull-off. Basically, the tips of the fingers, right underneath the nail, are where you want to strike the string. Don't be using any of this part of the finger, which is the flatter part of the finger, because when you play guitar, you build calluses on the end of the finger, and those calluses give you a good hard surface to strike the string with in order to get good dynamic volume. Okay, so as I position my first finger at the tip, when I hammer on, I'm going to pick the first note. Each time I do a new hammer on, I'm making sure I'm using the very tip of the finger in order to strike the note. So I've got the optimum position of the finger in order to get the best dynamic. Okay, when I do the pull-offs, just pull the finger down, try not to pull too far away from the instrument. You don't want this. and now my hand has pulled right away from the instrument. That's bad because all we have to do is then bring the hand back. It's wasted energy. Okay, so keep the fingers close to the fretboard and use the fingertips. And one more tip I'm going to give you is just to relax. You don't need to slam the fingers on and pull them off in order to get a good legato sound. If I just improvise around a G major scale, so all legato, apart from when I'm changing strings, and it's almost effortless. Okay, we'll talk a little bit later on about how you can check whether the technique is effortless, but I'm not, really going for it. It's a very relaxed motion. Okay, very little effort indeed. If you've got a guitar which is set up well, i.e. the strings aren't miles off the fretboard, this shouldn't be a difficult operation for you to do. Okay, so one more thing technique-wise. I often see a lot of guys when they're playing, they rotate this part of their hand, like the palm or the outer side of the back of the hand. And what you'll find is as they pull off and hammer on, they get this. That. Because you feel like that's going to enhance your ability to play legato, because as you pull away, you're using the weight of the hand to pull off and then using the weight of the hand to hammer back on. It's a bad idea because basically as you do it, you're adjusting the angles of the fingers against the strings, which we don't want to do. Okay? So when I play legato, if you keep an eye on this part of my hand, the back of my hand, you'll notice it doesn't move at all. Okay, and when I'm playing lines, there's minimal movement to accommodate the position of the hand, but I'm not rotating from left to right. Okay, so try and keep the back or the actual palm of the hand nice and static, or as static as possible. Okay, so that's the position of the hand. That's how you want your fingers to be. Try not to rotate that palm at all. Okay, so the next thing is when you've got the technique and you've got it correct, i.e. you're doing all of those things that we talked about, how do you then practice to develop speed and accuracy? Well, the key is to play very, very slowly and make sure the technique is 100% correct as many times as it can be. In other words, minimize mistakes. So you can only minimize mistakes if you practice at a speed that you are absolutely in control. And one of the things I did when I was working on getting my legato together, which is only in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been playing 17 years, but I wasn't a legato player until 4 or 5 years ago. So I really had to work on this because it wasn't part of my technique. What I did is I took phrases, just short phrases, and I would play them constantly, very slowly for maybe a 5-minute period with no breaks. So 5 minutes is a period where it seems like a long time when you're doing it, but you're not going to build up too much lactic acid in the hand because you're playing slowly, so you're not going to damage the muscles or the ligaments in the hand. And you're not going to develop tendinitis or any of those horrible things that can happen when you play really fast. But what you are doing is you're making sure you're 100% in control. So let me give you a phrase that you can play that is going to be in the key of G major. And actually we'll do it up at the... we'll do it at the 3rd fret. I was going to do it up here, but we'll do it at the 3rd fret so that it's a little bit easier in terms of the action of the guitar. So it's a little bit of a stretch. So if you start with the 1st finger, located at the 3rd fret of the E string, and then you're going to pick that note, and then hammer onto 5 on the same string with the 2nd finger, and then hammer onto 7 on the same string with the little finger. So we get this, 3, 5, 7. Okay, then bring the 2nd finger down to the A string at the 5th fret, and we're going to pick that note with a downstroke. And then 1st finger onto the 4th fret of the D string, and that one we're going to play with a downstroke also. Now you'll see me do this with my middle finger, because I'm a hybrid picking player, but a downstroke will function equally well. We then hammer onto 5 with the 2nd finger, and then onto 7 with the little finger. So we get this. Okay? We're then going to basically make our way back down that shape exactly the same way but in reverse. So we finished on D7, we then pull off back to D5, back to D4, and then we upstroke on A5 with the 2nd finger, and then upstroke again onto E7 with the little finger, and then pull off back to E5 with the 2nd finger, and then back to E3 with the 1st finger. So the full phrase very slowly goes like this. Okay, so there's a very simple phrase in the key of G, and the majority of the phrase is played legato. And what I want you to do with this is to find a speed that you can do this at where you don't make any mistakes and the timing is good. And you have to be very honest with yourself here. There's no shame in playing this slowly. If it's all correct. If you find at that tempo it's still not quite right, it's still not in time, you're not in control, again, slow down. What you're trying to do is you're trying to find the tempo that you can do this repeatedly with no mistakes. Okay, so I have a backing track which is just a drum loop at 90 beats per minute. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cycle this round for you just to give you an idea of how this should sound and how this should be timing wise. Now 90 beats per minute might be too fast for you. You might need to use a drum loop or a metronome which is slower. But it's really important to use some kind of drum loop or metronome to keep you in time so that you know you're playing this phrase with good time feel and all the notes are in the correct place and you're getting the right kind of feel basically and you're practicing in a good way. So when you do this, try and relax. Try not to emphasize any of the notes. Just listen to the phrase as how it should be with the drums. So let me try this for you at 90 beats per minute. I won't do it for 5 minutes, obviously, but when you do this at home, try and do this for a 5-minute period continually with as few mistakes as possible, and then have a break, and then try another phrase, okay? So let's try this with the drums and see how it sounds. Okay, so that's how the phrase would sound, and what I was doing there was I was playing quarter notes, or one sound per beat at my 90 beats per minute, and basically that allowed me to really think about the position of my hand, whether I was using the fingertips for each of those notes, what I was doing with the right hand, was I fully in control, did anything feel awkward? The other thing you want to make sure you do is relax from the shoulders, the jaw, make sure all of that's relaxed as well. Make sure your body's relaxed. If any tension creeps in while you're doing this, as soon as you speed it up, because it's more difficult, you'll find that the tension increases and it's harder for you to play more quickly. So this introduces another question, which is, when do I start to speed this stuff up? Well, what you want to do is you want to use a little bit of intuition. If you try and push this too fast too quickly, what you'll find is you do more harm than good. And this is part of the problem with when you join what you might call the metronome brigade, where you try and constantly push yourself forwards with the metronome. It can work for some people, it certainly does, because you can see evidence of it. But if you're not the kind of guy who if you find there's a lot of tension that builds up in your playing when you play fast, you want to practice nice and slowly and get the relaxation element into your playing. So what you'll find is the more you do this, you'll start to feel that it's much easier. And I'm a big kind of believer in the fact that if you do something like legato, which is quite a relaxed technique, as opposed to alternate picking, which is a very muscular technique, the technique should feel as easy slow as it does when you play fast. There shouldn't be any more effort involved because you've learnt to relax when you do the technique. So you'll know when it's time to start speeding up because you'll feel right when you do so. If it doesn't feel right, just back off and keep practicing slowly. And you keep at that slow tempo. It might take you 3 weeks, it might take you 3 months, it might take you 6 months, it might take you 3 years. Now, I don't want to put you off by saying that, but what I'm saying is in order for you to develop that speed and accuracy, you need to take your time and slow down. Well, that's the way I do it anyway, and it seems to work for a lot of my students as well. So let me just introduce one more thing to you, which is the idea that when an idea or a technique has become subconscious and you can use it improvisationally, generally what you'll find is you can allow other parts of your brain to try to and do other things. When you're improvising with a technique, you have to think about note choice, you have to think about dynamics, If you're playing over chord changes, you have to think about what are the notes that fit over that particular chord, what scales and arpeggios can I use, all the while using complicated techniques like legato and hybrid picking. So there has to be part of the brain remaining for thinking about those things. So you'll know when you've got a technique subconsciously because you could try having a conversation with somebody whilst doing the technique. So when I play legato, generally you'll find that I can have a conversation or talk at the same time. So I can have a conversation whilst I'm playing, and I'm not too worried about what I'm talking about, or I'm not going out of time with the legato. I'm not talking in time either. I'm not sort of talking on the beat or anything. So if you can do that and you can talk and play at the same time, you know that the technique has become subconscious. So you might want to get a friend or anybody, even your mum or whoever, and get them to sit in front of you while you're playing and have them have a conversation with you. Just fire questions like, what did you have for breakfast? Or anything along those lines, that you have to think about the answers and your response isn't just a learnt response, so that you have that element of the brain that's available to you whilst you're doing this complicated technique. And then you'll know that you've got the accuracy, you've got the speed, but you can also use the technique improvisationally, so you can think about your note choice at the same time. Okay, so just as I say, be very conscious and aware of where you are in terms of your finger placement. The speed will come as a natural byproduct of the accuracy. If you're not accurate with your technique, you can't play fast and efficiently. So you watch guys who play really quickly, who are known for certain techniques, you won't see strain on their faces, you won't see them struggling to or sort of fighting with their technique. What you'll see is them very relaxed and actually playing music, as opposed to the technique ruling them, and they haven't got anything else left over mentally to actually play music. So take that phrase, and you could develop this yourself. Just come up with phrases that are very simple, based around a single scale. You could even just go up and down the scale. That would be absolutely fine, so long as you're just really focusing on that technique and playing very slowly. Definitely do it with a drum machine or some kind of loop or some kind of backing track, just to keep you in time. And hopefully what you'll find is over the course of a fairly long period of time, but not too long, you'll start to see huge improvements in your technique and your speed and your accuracy that will be very useful to you. You'll be very relaxed when you play. So I hope you found this lesson useful and enjoyable, and I will see you next time in the next issue of Guitar Interactive. Thank you.